Machine translation, production line or manual assembly. What are we going to talk about? We will talk about many languages, many issues, but those who didn't make any post-editing and MT, so to let you know what MT means, what it consists of, and so on. So the idea is like this. If you didn't hear anything about MT, it's not a problem at all. This presentation is dedicated for you. If you have experience in PMT and you know something in PMT, so then it could be useful for you also, because you could find something new for you and something useful. What we're going to talk about? First of all, why MT? Why humanity? In the beginning of 21st century, just started using MT. Afterwards, we will speak about architecture of MT engines, what are the types of such engines, what are their pros and cons, and how we could use them. Afterwards, we will discuss with you requirements for PEMT. I mean, what are the types of post-editings for machine translation, and what are the requirements actually for such types. Also, we will discuss what do we need in order to be a good post-editor, because more or less all of us working in the translation industry, we will be forced to work with MT, because as I say to my students, post-editing for machine translation is a translation of the 21st century, and if you would like to work in the translation industry, you should either find a niche or to become quality post-editor. And in the end, we will look at some cases of post-editing for machine translation in order to understand what machine translation we could receive as a result as translation to Ukrainian language. And I would like to switch my slides. How can I do it? Maybe it would help.
I see.
Okay. First of all, I would like to start with statistics. This study has been done by a Common Sense Advisory, and just 2 years ago they asked to different companies all over the world, and I mean here LSP, language service providers, so they asked them the following question: do you offer post-editing for machine translation as PEMT, as a service? In 2018, 72% of large LSP, almost half of the medium LSPs, almost 1/3 of small LSPs, and almost 1/4 of freelancers answered that they have already suggested this service. How do you think? What are the figures as of today? Yes, they're much higher. Twice? No, we can't say twice for large LSPs, but usually the growth is 20-25% plus. And I think for 2 years this growth is incredible. In the 2020s, more than 95% of the large LSP, more than 60% of medium, and more than half of the small LSP already offer PEMT as a service. So we can't say that MT is a future, because MT is a current life. It lives together with us. That's why we should either know how to live with it or to find a niche, and we'll speak about it later. Why actually MT? Because we have, of course, much more reasons that outlined on this slide. How I understand it. Of course, informational burst. You know about it, it's not something new, but if you take all types of information, that have been produced in electronic form from the beginning of computing era, and this figure will be equal for 100%. For the recent 2 years, 90% of all this 100 figure have been developed. So only 10% from the 50s of the previous century up to the 2018s have been developed. And for the recent 2 years, 90% of information has been developed. Of course, any person can't manage this volume of information. In order to stand the scope of this information burst, we should imagine if all workable age people of our Earth sit behind the computers, they make some translations, and they do the translations 8 hours per day. It's around 2,000 words. Then it will be just less than 20% of everything that should be translated. And of course, it's nonsense. No one will do this experiment in real life. But this is just an essence of MT. Why we need MT? Because we have this informational burst, and we can't manage it. We can't. That's why we are forced to work and to live with machine translation. Speed in appropriate and favorable language pairs, and I've communicated with some people here at the conference, those who have experience in PEMT, and we know that English Portuguese and English Spanish are the best 2 language pairs for neuron engine trainings. We could train such engines, and then a quality post editor could manage 6,000, 7,000 words per day, and it's 3 times higher than a human translation, as it said. And of course, it will give us that volume growth in order to cover and this informational burst. And when I communicate with my students, I ask, why do you need MT is used? And the answer is just simple, because those rich, they would like to save money on us. Then I ask the following question. Who of you from time to time at least uses MT in your everyday life? Of course, almost all of you. Then just stay at the position of your client. MT exists. Why can't we use it? Because of course, and then of course, clients, if they have this chance, they use MT and send the documents for post editing. And one of the things is psychological readiness. We should speak about 2 important aspects related to psychological readiness. First of all, is that we are forced to be psychologically ready, because if not, we will not be able to cover all that volume of information. So we should be positive towards MT. But from another side, for the recent 10 years, quality of the MT, especially when neural MT has been developed, so the quality increased drastically. Because it's obvious that MT quality has been increased drastically. In Translatel, even when leverage was 0 from MT, nevertheless, even at those times, we agreed to work with MT. So 10 years ago, in English-Ukrainian pair, there was just maximum 5% efficiency of MT. We really provided that fair discount for this MT appliance. Now, really, leverage is much higher. We could speak about 20, 30, and more percent of efficiency and quality. And now, post-editing of such text is much easier than it was 10 years ago. So, history, background. Of course, we can't understand any notion without historical background. Just a few facts for you. All historical facts right now are really easy to be found. And of course, I think that 1 hour presentation is too long. So I hope that I will cut it off somehow. Maybe we will have time for discussion. So just a few facts. MT was developed after the World War II, but the ideas, the thoughts, to create MT and a person should be a supporter for the work of such machine. So these thoughts have been raised 100 years ago. And the first person who thought about it was American. But at that time, these were just theoretical developments. There were no computers of such efficiency and such powers. So MT really appeared after the Second World War II, after developments and deployments of the military cryptography. So really, MT in many books, I didn't find that information that war really gave an impetus to the development of MT. Because why? Because military people, they were just without any work because the war was over. So we could understand this correlation between cryptography and translation. We could think that the beginning of the burst of the MT was in the beginning of the 1950s with the Georgetown experiment. So that was a time the development of the first rule-based engine. There were only 300 rules and around 100 words in the glossary. And they used several hundreds of sentences from English into Russian on the politics, economy, oil industry, and something else. After that Georgetown experiment, newspapers across the world and the humanity at all were so overwhelmed that BBC wrote that in 5 or 6 years, all literature would be translated into Royal English. Of course, there was a burst of interest, a lot of investments were dedicated to this sphere, and all expected a high disrupt of technologies in this sphere. But LLPC just understood and declared that language is partially code, that we can't expect for the high growth. All investments were declined in the 70s, 80s. Rule-based machine translation has been created. So it was a gradual development. But in the 90s, there was a new burst when statistical systems of the machine translation have been developed. We'll speak about them later. I just could say that such a cornerstone was 2016 when the Google and other companies started to pay for API. So in the 2011, sorry, in the 2016, since 2016, we have been living in the world of the neural translation.
As regards the architecture of the engines, I've already mentioned RBMT. Here we have statistical systems, neural and hybrid as well, as a combination of the previous systems, So I'm going to talk about the systems at the level that each and every linguist should know, regardless of whether you are planning to post-edit machine translation. So rule-based is about grammatical and syntactical accuracy. The stable quality is another criteria. And this is pretty much obvious because rule-based engines are perhaps the smartest ones. If you if you could say that. So it's quite stable. Now, it offers different ways to work with the terminology. You don't really need any external applications. What matters is that you can ensure consistency. If yes, you're good to go. Rules and dictionaries is also something that you should consider, because if you are, for example, translating just weather forecasts, use that and practice on those. Now, introducing changes to the rules during the training, it could also be an advantage. As regards the drawbacks is the great number of rules and the fact that it requires great resources. In the early days, there would be a group of applied linguists, even though back then they weren't called as such. But anyhow, they would work on this for years, for as long as it takes, and so it would take a lot of resources and time to train an engine. So you need a lot of resources, and that could be a drawback here. Statistical MT. This is something that's been in place since mid-90s. So you analyze bulks of text, and if you work with rule-based machine translation, you would need a team of linguists to write those rules, to develop those rules. Here, you have the machine do that for you. So you work on those texts, and then you, so to say, feed them into the machine, and the machine, in turn, analyzes this information because it's got this great capacity. And once you have it analyzed, as you can see on the slide, we're talking about 300, something in the average of in between 300,000 up to 200 million words. So it doesn't really take much resources. When I train my students, we are using statistical and neural engines. And in a few months, you can have a student who's not even a linguist yet train a statistical MT. So it doesn't really take a team of linguists to work on this. Only one linguist could do it. Now, styles. It's true that here this engine is better, because if you're working with rule-based engines, the translation it renders is almost literal, word by word. Here it's not neural yet, but much better. If you're talking about Russian and Ukrainian, there is this issue. We don't really like to share, right, as Ukrainians. So there's not really much text to train your engine on. So it's a drawback here. Another thing is rubbish in, rubbish out. Rubbish out. You can't really expect to be able to train your engine using poor quality texts and expect it to give you high quality when you put it into operation. That's not going to happen. So, like I said, rubbish in, rubbish out. It's like in physics. And then you need other applications to help the machine work with the terminology. This is something you should also keep in mind. Now, 3 to 5 words get translated, meaning that the machine breaks the sentence into 3 to 5 word chunks and then merges it all together. And you can actually see where it merged those pieces. So it's not smooth enough, and it's a drawback. Neural machine translations. Unlike with the statistical MT, This one is much easier to read, and the people I've spoken to, they all actually confirm this. So it's great with the style, probably the best solution for this. And again, you don't really need much resources. Just one expert working with the engine is enough. The drawback is that your translation is quite smooth, but it's like inadequacy. The end result could lack adequacy. So whenever you post-edit neural translations, you need to be very aware of this. You need to read the original and compare it with the translation to make sure that it is adequate. Then again, lack of text corpuses. Again, it's a great problem. Rubbish in, rubbish out. Because we're talking about deep learning. And this is how it happens. You feed this large bulk of text into the machine and train it. That's why we call it neural. That's why we're talking about deep learning here. And the final drawback here is the terminology issue. You need additional applications to work with that. Now, hybrid MT. This, like I said, is a combination of the other three. What kind of hybrids are out there? It could be a multi-engine system, when you're using several engines at the same time. You might have this experience, when you, as a translator, choose the option that is most adequate to the original, and then you edit it. And we will get back to this in a short while. Now, consequent deployment of several machines where each engine is supposed to give you a better result with each step, but I haven't really seen that in practice. Now, accuracy assessment. First, you do neural translation, then you assess the quality to see whether you have managed to get the desired level of adequacy. If not, your assessment says that the translation is not good enough. Then you compare, you keep working in it, and then you compare the two again. Another hybrid is when you combine your CAT and your MT. If you get a good match, you use it. If it's a no match, then the machine steps in and proposes a machine translation that you would need to post-edit. This is a quite common hybrid solution. Now, as regards the deployment of machines in production, I will not really go into that in detail. But in general, you need to analyze the text and then decide whether you should employ machines, and if yes, in what combinations. So, successful post-editor. Who is this person? This is the person who is positive about machine translations. Just before this presentation, I've spoken to a few colleagues, and from what I could feel, they were not exactly positive about machines and using them in translation. And I used to be that person, in fact. Why? Because it's pretty obvious. It feels like something or someone is out there to take your place, to get you. But what I'm saying is that you need to be positive about this, because it is the future that is already happening. And unless you're positive about it, you will never be able to perform as a post editor effectively. You need to be fluent, of course, in the source language, and you need to be keen on using machine translations. You need to have this gut feeling, this as a linguist. You need to know the subject matter to post-edit effectively. You need to know how to use CATs and other technologies. You also need to have post-editing experience to use MT rationally, to assess it. Rationally, you need to be able to objectively measure whether this particular sentence needs post-editing or whether you should just go ahead and rewrite it altogether. Because if you're negative, you will just keep deleting sentences and translating them again, which means poor performance. It's not something our client is expecting us to do. And finally, being able to identify and use empty leverage. Usually we use machines when it comes to large texts, but the quality is not really very stable, especially if we're talking about statistical or neural translations. And you can just say, okay, I can see that the text is bad. I will have to rewrite it completely just by assessing the first page, because it's not always an accurate assessment. Again, you need to be positive about MT. You need to be able to read carefully and assess what you could use and what you couldn't use. Now, when you post-edit, try to be as rational about it as possible. Try to look for appropriate translations, even if you see that the translation you're post-editing is not of the best quality. And then do not spend too much time working on specific MTs that are of poor quality, because it would take lots of time to post-edit it. And it doesn't mean that the machine translated it badly. It might mean that you are at this point just like in the skill, so keep this in mind. Again, you need to go back and assess your own editing. Now, are we talking about opportunities here, or is MT killing our profession? Well, I'm with those who see new opportunities here. I'm a bit tired. I've been around for too long, and I'm a bit tired of your regular translations. So I could use something new. And some would say that it's the same as it's just another cat tool, but I would say that it's a different kind of toys. And you cannot stop a progress. You cannot stop progress.
So if you are even a director of the most powerful translation company or language provider in the world, I would like not to just announce it, but you know this company, you can't do anything with MT because you can't stop the progress. You could only be in love with MT or find your niche. Become a transcriber, become an translator for literature, become a terminologist, or find any other profession. There are many of them. So you have only two options: or become a quality post editor and be a model, an example for others, or to find a niche, because it's just a bad idea to struggle to fight against the MT. It's just a bad idea. So what are expectations from post-editing? From the 2011, you remember I told you that API is under sell. So it's already a service. Whether there is a difference between MT quality and human translation quality, I would like to give you just to cite you the biggest translation company. Translation is statistically переклад є стилістично добрим, гарним, якщо стиль, але стиль може відрізнятися. Of course, style could be different because machine makes a style different in comparison with the human translation, but these differences are so small that we are ready to it. We communicate as machines or semi-machines. We communicated with one of my colleagues. So machine translation will not be just something in our eyes. Could we just compare some style differences with the general translation? Could we use it? Yeah, it's a problem of ethics. You should apply a machine translation upon agreement with your client, and usually MT is being applied on big volumes. And usually on big volumes, your client would understand that you use MT without his her agreement. So this should be upon decision of the client. Problems of MT in the industry, some budget negative features. You can't evaluate appropriately your efforts. I remember my beginning in this sphere. Now situation is very similar. At the time, 20 years ago, all thought about how much money should be paid for matches, and now again we think about how much money should be paid for the post-editing. I think there are different categories of matches, and different clients pay for different money, but at the same time the process is stable. So I think here the situation is the same. With some time there will be appropriate payment, decent payment for such post-editing. Lack of qualified specialists, and I think this is a long-term problem. Of course, we will have more and more post-editors, but that information burst will cause the increase in volume of the text to be translated. It means that non-professionals will do post-editing with wrong attitude to the MT. It means that we should always remember, not always MT is a wrong participant. Maybe we don't have necessary skills for post-editing. So types of the post-editing, full and partial. First of all, please don't just cite me or don't refer to me when, for example, you receive requirements from your client, and these requirements will be different from those that I will show you today. Because as I said already, there are different types of post-editing. Listen to your client, listen to requirements of your client. We have maximum and minimum of different post-editing categories. So now we will look at the maximum and minimum. So requirements to the partial post-editing, good enough, fit for purpose. This is the words of the biggest translation company. What we correct? Mistakes that could cause some legal outcomes, negative outcomes, mistakes that really become an obstacle of general understanding of the text or implementation of the instructions, non-translated, some unfinished sentences. What we have a result that syntax and grammar could be unnatural, but they should not be an obstacle for the main purpose of this text. Of course, some orthographical, punctuation, grammar, syntactical mistakes, some terminology, cursivity. So we leave it as it is. Main purpose of the text should be clear. Full post-editing requirement is the following: close to human translation. Close here is the main word because very many people, many clients think that if they order full post-editing, then it will be done by the human translation. No, by human. No, it's not true, because machines do translation in another way, in another protocol in comparison with people. So of course, you will understand that this translation is done not by human but by the machines. But it will be, it will cause no discomfort for you. What we correct some terminology, grammar forms, orthography, some punctuation, so some lacks in the meaning and slang and so on. We should correct it. As a result, we will receive clear main and secondary thoughts, correlation of the purpose of the text, correct grammar, orthography, and syntaxes, and somehow ideal-stylistic alignment, because it doesn't mean that it will be fully match to the human translation. We understand that this translation is done by machine. Here is the comparison table of partial and full post-editing. We will have a practical task right now. We will look at some text translated by the machine, and for you should understand whether it would be easy for you to post-edit it or not. So partial, good enough, fit for purpose; full post-editing, close to human translation. So in the partial, clear understanding of the outcome source; in the full, clear understanding of the purpose with the full message and details. Partial, lack of stylistic correspondence and alignment; in the full, ideal-stylistic alignment. Partial, syntaxes and grammar could be unnatural but with a clear main thought; and in the full, correct grammar, orthography, terminology, aggressivity, syntax, and so on. And in partial, of course, we just don't correct it. We leave it as this. The first sample of the text translated by the machine. If you can't see it on the slide, I could read you a text, just a translation, and just feel how far this text is from the final post-editing, both partial and final. Context is about oils. Our last article focused on maximizing energy efficiency and productivity, as well as the role of lubricants in older equipment. Second phrase, our company regularly works with customers to conduct used oil analysis programs through our enabled mobile surf lubricant analysis program. I'm not going to read you the third phrase. Maybe you could read it. So this is the first example. Please look at it, just store it in your memory, and then we will compare what is the best one, what is the worst one, and so maybe mediocre quality, and so on. You are very pessimistic. The second option.
Другий. Назва файлу join dev text of
So the text file that and the name of the file is a text file that you can open and edit in any standard text editor. This is a source. So this is just a source, this is the interface for drawing program, and that automatic drawing views are views that you select create in view creation before creating a single part, assembly, or a cast unit drawing. This is not a good sentence, very good sentence, because that's just like a string in the locality slang, because it's part of the text that will become a part of the button or program or so on or code. View specific properties are defined separately for each view that you select to create. This is the third sentence. The sort option of the text is advertisement text. So the first source text: manage your global data residency needs and drive the digital transformation of your organization with per user data location controls and program name. Multi-tier is now available for Exchange Online and OneDrive. Do you understand something if you compare source with the translation? What is the best translation? The second option. And the second is the translation of the neural MT. So we can't take into consideration, of course, strings. This is just a list of phrases. So the second place, what do you think? Which the first option, and the third, the worst translation, of course, the third option, because here we just a list of words and no sense. Of course, marketing text could be translated in different ways. If this is a market indicating to gadget promotion, yes, it could be translated by the MT, but I agree with you that it's difficult right now to translate marketing text for selling the services. It's difficult. Yeah, it's too early. What are the outcomes? What MT quality depends on type of MT system. So we looked at the three main types, their historical backgrounds, their pros and cons. Second, depending on. So quality of the training texts. You can't expect that rubbish in will not cause rubbish out. Peculiarities of text. The last third option of the MT translation. Did you recognize that it was too long? And the longer is the phrase, the sentence, the less qualitative is the result. Some peculiar features of the text is the third option on which quality of the MT depends on. So the second outcome, MT, is a logical outcome of the progress. We can't stop the progress. We should struggle for the fair remuneration for our efforts, but we should not fight with the MTs. So, of course, we can't agree with the MTs, but it would not stop MT. You should be used to work with MT or find a niche. You should not fight with it. It's fighting with the MT sphere is the same as trying to fight with the train. Each MT system is good in its own niche, and neural MT is not always the best option. The second case was a statistical case, and there was a hybrid statistics plus neural. Problems with MT in the Eastern Europe, it's not about its usage, but about inadequate assessment. It relates to the correlation and trying to use text corpuses from the Western Europe in the Eastern Europe. And sometimes, for example, today we could see English-Spanish, and we could try to correlate with English-Ukrainian. There should be discount of 60%. And here we try to prepare huge volumes of text, and we try to explain that in the English-Ukrainian pair, this discount is not appropriate at all, because in different language pairs, engine trainings are absolutely different. And for English-Ukrainian pair, 60% discount is not appropriate at all. And it's a productive way to work with MT. So you should not fight with MT, but you should struggle for the decent remuneration for your efforts. And the third outcome that in Ukraine, non-translation companies should initiate usage of the MT, but a final client initiates usage of the MT. Company and the translator should stand on on the same positions. So clients suggest us to use a PEMT. It means that those big clients, following them, we suggest to you, we give you this assignment for post-editing. So being in the same boat, let's have the same standing. Let's just define the decent remuneration for post-editing. Thank you very much.
Does anyone here in the audience have questions? So let's start with you, and then we have at least one question that was sent.
Okay, sure.
Okay, Fedor.
Федор Безруков, Логурсети. Саша, а вот смотри, ты говорил о автоматической оценке качества при использовании гибридной модели.
Да.
То есть система автоматически сравнивает с чем-то, автоматически проверяет качество. С чем сравнивается для того, чтобы понять? То есть если есть какой-то эталон, то почему его не использовать? И откуда он возьмется, если человек...
Standard model. Actually, it's a little bit difficult and easier, more difficult and easier at the same time. There are different models. There is a Blur automated quality assessment system, for example. I meant this system like this. Blur defines how text is consistent, how texts are consistent between each other. Some systems check some corrections. So I understood your question. How it's compared with, so it's compared with human translation, actually. It's compared with quality human translation. In the second case, model that you mentioned, actually, there is a comparison of those changes or amendments that should be done for the MT in order to achieve the same result as from the human translation.
Addition here. I just presented this a couple days ago at Yandex Hyperbeten. So the thing is, guys, one thing I really want to tell you all. Neither n-gram-based methods, be it Blue, Meteor, whatever else, nor edit and distance, tell you anything about the quality of the text. And any quality assurance or any objective methods that you apply prove to you that the results they provide are absolutely arbitrary and are hugely skewed towards the exact engine that was used originally. That is, if you edit after the engine, the results are much better compared to any other text you create, whether it's a manual translation or it's another machine translation or whatever. So I would kind of caution you against using those methods to actually measure quality and discourage your clients from trying to persuade you that these provide an adequate quality measurement. It's not. And whoever is interested in that piece, you can read my articles. They are published on LinkedIn. Thank you. Okay, yes. We have one more question here.
Alexander, вопрос от онлайн.
There is a question from the online audience, Kirill Fedotov. For the recent 6 months, what is the percent in your work of translations has been done by the MTs, and what is your discount that you suggest to the clients if they agree on the appliance of the MT? Is it a suggestion or a question actually? What a pity that Kirill is not with us today here offline, but in the hybrid model, in the English-Russian pair, where for fuzzy and 100% match, there is a human translation memory is used, and in other cases, machine translation, we have 30%. In the English-Ukrainian, the discount is lower, significantly lower, because quality is, of course, is lower, and not all people use it. Discount depends on the quality. As I have said in my presentation, So our specialists are very professional, highly professional ones, and so they know how to check and what to suggest our clients. So it depends on the translation quality, but the highest but the highest discount that we suggested 30-35%, plus minus 5%. So maybe I'm mistaken, but not more than 5%. I don't remember more actually, but we do really a lot of the post editing of our MT.
Oh, actually, it's quite a nice audience. You are asking questions.
Добрий день. Я буду мовою доповіді запитувати.
There is this thing when it comes to using MT. When you are a freelancer, for example, I would have bought my DeepL license and integrated it with a memo queue a long time ago, but a lot of my clients expressly have it in their NDAs, no machine translation. Even if the engine claims to delete all of the segments upon certain conditions, you can never control that, and you can never prevent it from becoming available online at some point. And what was your question? It was just a remark. Well, then I agree, fully agree. Western companies are much more serious about it, sure, but I cannot speak on their behalf today, and I cannot confirm that it's 100% how it is. But if your client insists on not having their texts translated by machines, then it's how it should be. And you can never be sure that at some point those segments will not be used for any other purposes by any other entities or operators. So you need express permission from your client, otherwise it would not be ethical. I remember how during the first UT conference, someone said they had researched the entire market in the Eastern Europe, but they didn't find any case when the translator was prosecuted for using MTs or for similar mistakes. But I can tell you for sure that there have been precedents, because there are all those apps, semi-spies, that they can restore the text, reconstruct the entire agreement, for example, from separate segments. So there could be severe legal consequences. I know that for a fact.
Ще раз доброго дня, пане Олександр. Дуже
Hello again, and thank you for this delivery. My question is this. Since we have this opportunity to talk offline, I have to ask you. We've been talking about quality quite a lot. It's come up many times. But it is, in fact, not about the quality per se, but about any document, any standard that we as freelancers could use when we negotiate with our clients, to explain to them something that is already obvious to us, that there is no machine that is able to produce the same quality of translation as a human. Where do I refer my clients? Well, thank you for your question. I don't think it could be textbooks that you could reference, but maybe the process that I mentioned on one of my slides, because that data is openly available. I will not be naming this company, but you all know who I am talking about. There's this company who is very clear on their conditions as regards full or partial post-editing. And even when it comes to full post-editing, it says that it has to be close to human, not human translation. So you could refer to that document. I'm not sure if they are the biggest player, this company, but they are one of the biggest, definitely. And they realize that it cannot be human quality. It is close to human translation. MLVs know that, but not the end clients. The end client might think that we just get this machine to translate something for us, and then we send it for post-editing. But it's not how it happens. The machine delivers different sorts of sentences. That's why it is close to human and not human. This is where you should start from when you negotiate. I've mentioned this a few times that 10 years ago it was really a challenge to communicate this to their client, but not anymore. It's easier today. If you explain these things to them, if you give examples, eventually they get on board. It's possible, so you just need to communicate. Thank you.
Okay, we have one more replica and we have 5 more minutes.
Саша, я с позволения твоего добавлю по поводу стандартов.
A brief comment from me, if I might add. As regards the standards, for MT you can find the respective ISO for post-editing adopted a few years ago. So if you need a standard, use this. And secondly, if we're talking about data storage, just recently I looked into the service agreement of Google, and it says that we do not save your segments that you are providing us for training the engines for now. So this for now thing is there, and you never know if it backfires.
Okay. Thank you so much once again.